Okay, so this video is going to be about compression ratio, and we're going to take a look at some websites. We're going to look at what Carsey thought, what he did. We're going to take a quick look at what Berg used to do, because Carsey and Berg were contemporaries back in the 70s and 80s, and they both had kind of differing philosophies. So we're going to look at what they did, and look at what I did, and we're going to try and pick a winner based not on just a bunch of, my reputation's better than yours. We're actually going to look at some physics. Again, we got to go to the website to take a look at some of that stuff. Okay, here I am. I'm back to the Berg website. And in general, his philosophy is you will run no more than 6.6 to 1 compression with 87 octane. Maybe a 6.9 for 91. Okay, and then we come down here. Remember, this is basically about getting better mileage, so we have to look at what he said about this stuff. You'll live longer, run cooler, better economy. Okay, so that's what we're into, is mileage, better economy on those two particular octane fuels. So there we go. We've got Berg's philosophy. All right, now we got to take a look at Carsey's philosophy. Now, I've gone through Carsey's little book here, and you're going to dig through this book through and through, and it's not actually going to tell you what kind of compression ratio to run. Let's just jump over to the assembly, and we need to get over to the part where he's talking about the heads, which I believe is right there. So basically what he's telling you is you're going to try and achieve, if I can see it here, 43 cc combustion chambers. Okay, and he's also going to tell you where's your deck height. He's got a deck height listed in here somewhere. Okay, so back over on this page right here, this is where he's talking about his deck height. The piston must sit 0.045 to 0.050 down in the barrel, which is just a little bit tighter than you would get on a stock 1600. So he's not doing a lot of tight deck height, and I can go with that. That's fine. So anyway, he doesn't, like I said, he doesn't actually tell you what the compression ratio is from all that stuff, but we can go to a website and dig up what that actually is. So we're going to come over here to CB Performance's engine calculator, and of course Carsey was running a 1415 cc motor, 77 by 76. Let's go with the 0.045 deck height and 43 cc combustion chambers. Compression ratio 8.3 to 1. So we've got two guys, different philosophies. We've got the Berg that's down there at 6 or 6.6 to 1. And we've got Carsey, who's at 8.3, and I know that eventually he ran that motor up to about 9 to 1, and had good success at 9 to 1. So the question comes down to, I'm not going to pick a side one way or another. I'm simply going to say, what does physics tell you is the better way to go? Do you go down, or do you go up? Which one's going to produce the better efficiency? First thing you got to do, this is something called Carnot's theorem. Just a name. But basically, it falls down to your efficiency. Nice little symbol, that's what it represents, is going to be the efficiency, is equal to 1 minus the temperature cold divided by the temperature hot. So basically what it's saying is, if you're building an engine that relies on heat, and we have heat engines, that's what an internal combustion engine is, it's a heat engine. In order to suck energy out of your engine, you need to have a temperature differential, cold and hot, and what we're looking for is basically, what do we need to do? So, starting with Carnot's theorem, being a whole bunch of crazy formulas. These are real nice. Okay, basically what they're telling you is that I can take the volumes, these would be temperatures at different positions during the 4-stroke cycle, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can plug them in. I've got different compression ratios, so that's what the C is going to be. You go through a bunch of machinations, reduce, 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 and it boils down to this particular formula right here, which is basically Carnot's theorem, 1 minus 1 over, and you get this little oddball looking thing right here. The R is your compression ratio. This gamma is something called a specific heat. It's actually a specific heat ratio. It tells you how well the gas that you're compressing, in our particular case it's going to be primarily nitrogen and exhaust byproducts. When you take that particular gas and you cram it down and then try and get work out of it. As you expand it, you've got that particular little piece that you have to take your compression ratio and raise it to. Bottom line from this particular physics, the physics of the situation. This isn't my opinion, this isn't Berg, this isn't Carsey, this is physics. Physics says that if my compression ratio goes up, it's in the denominator, that means this value is going to get smaller, which means as the compression ratio goes up, the amount that I'm going to deduct from 1 gets smaller, which means a higher compression ratio is going to produce a more efficient motor. The physics says that Berg was wrong and that Carsey, and pretty much everybody else, is right. Yes, it's a Wikipedia article. Wikipedia is fantastic. As a matter of fact, you can also look up Carnot. Carnot is also over here on Wikipedia. Alright, so we've got a formula that tells us higher compression is better. But the question is, well, okay, I know if I go high enough, there's going to be some of the down effects of running high compression is you're probably going to eventually you're going to start knocking. That's why we don't run all that high compression typically in our air-cooled motors. But what happens? Let's take a look at a spreadsheet. Always have to have a spreadsheet. Let's go to this one right here. So you want to know how much better you can do if you jump from one compression ratio to another. So let's suppose I was running 8 and I wanted to go to 9. I have a theoretical maximum efficiency. Tells me I've got a 4% gain in efficiency by jumping from 8 to 9. So 4% is really not a huge gain. It's not. If I go from 8 to 10, I got 7.5. If I go from 8 to 11, I got a 10.5. I'd like to get a 10.5, but I think 11 is probably a little bit high. I mean, I run an 11 to 1 plus in my 74, or at least I used to, and I used to have to run at least 91 octane. 92 is better. On a hot summer day, I used to have to run 93. So when you're getting up into these 11s, you are talking about some pretty expensive gasoline in one of these high fuel efficiency motors. Let's see, what else was I doing on this particular thing? Oh yeah, we want to know what kind of a difference it is. Well, if I started off at 30 miles per gallon, we might go to 31.2. So that your 4% gets you a mile per gallon. It's not huge. So this is a lot of the guys, they go kind of conservative when they build these motors. Like the high VW guys went with 8.25 to 1. My motor was 8.25 to 1. And you can run up to 9, but it's not really going to net you a lot of stuff. There were other ways that those hot VW guys came up with, more than 4%. I'd like to have my 4%, and there are going to be other reasons why you'd probably want to go a little bit higher than the 8.25 to 1. Let's take a look at some other stuff. Okay, so one of the things that you're going to want to do when you're building your motor, just like I did when I was building mine, is you want to take into account where do you plan on driving your car. For me, I live at about 850 feet in altitude, and when I drive my Beetle, I pretty much always go up in altitude. So I would probably, if I was building my next motor, I will anticipate an altitude of about 1,000 feet. Now here's the thing, as you go up in altitude, your compression ratio can go higher. Now when you go up in altitude, the air pressure, however, drops. So your compression ratio is an inverse relative to the atmospheric pressure, which means when you plug into this particular calculator, this is omnicalculator.com, let's see if I can get it in there, omnicalculator.com, physics, air pressure at altitude. So, useful little thing right there. Anyway, pressure sea level. Do not put the pressures in, just put in your compression ratio. So, you pick your cam out, you talk to your manufacturer says, like that cheater cam, manufacturer says, run 8.25 to 1. You're going to put 8.25 to 1 in down here, 25. Your temperature, let's say it's a nice day, 85 degrees. Your altitude is going to be, let's go to sea level, 8.25 to 1. Alright, so he's going to tell you what you're, basically, if you're at sea level, run that particular compression ratio. But I don't live at sea level, I live at 1,000 feet. So 8.21 converts to, at my altitude, All right, 100 feet. Let's juice it a little bit more. All right, I'm up to 8.54. That's more like it. Okay. So I would want to be about 8.54 to 1. All right. Let's juice it a little bit more. You go to 2,000 feet. I'm not sure what cities are at around 2,000 feet, but let's see. I guess Asheville, North Carolina might be close to 2,000 feet. Anyway, that gets you up to about 8.8 to 1. See if we go to 3,000 feet. Who's at about 3,000 feet? Let me see. Rapid City, South Dakota, maybe? You're pushing 9 to 1 by the time you get up into the Black Hills of South Dakota. All right, let's go to 4,000 feet. All right, who's got 4,000 feet? Are you pushing like, geez, the High Plains. That's like far western Kansas is about 4,000 feet. There aren't any big cities out there. Goodland, Kansas, 4,000 feet. 9.5 to 1. Let's say you're all the way out in Denver. All right, now we're taking 9.8 to 1. So that's something for you to think about as you bounce up and down in altitude. Understand how you need to take your compression ratio and run it up or run it down relative to what the manufacturer recommends for their camshaft. Generally speaking, I think the manufacturers for the camshafts are kind of conservative. I think you could always run a little bit more, like cheater cam at 8.25 to 1. Why not make it 8.5 to 1? And let's take it back to my altitude, which is going to be 1,000 feet. I'm at 8.8. So, the next time I build one of these, I'm probably going to try and keep my compression ratio perhaps just a touch below 9 to 1. All right, there's good things and bad things about running up your compression ratio. And we'll take a look here real quick, back to another Wikipedia page. One of the bad things about running up your compression ratio is pollution. In general, let's take a real quick look at what happens when you burn gasoline. Here's our gasoline. This is what happens. You take gasoline, combine it with oxygen, you get carbon dioxide and water. Okay, this isn't necessarily a whole bunch of pollution, but that right there is what they call a greenhouse gas. And of course, we're heating up our planet. And sorry, I mean, this is a rather anti-Republican way of viewing it, but yes, yeah, it is a greenhouse gas. It is going up, and we are heating up our environment through carbon dioxide. And as a crummy Volkswagen, stinky, smelly, they're polluters, I want to do my part. And these days, it's not the smog that gets you, it's your carbon dioxide. So you want to reduce your carbon dioxide by building a car that gets better gas mileage. Okay? Now, when you start running your compression up, one of the reasons why it works is, let's go back to Carnot's theorem. There it is. We want temperature cold, temperature hot. We want that temperature to be as hot as possible. In order to get it hot, we showed that we had to go with compression. We come back over to gasoline. We see that we've got no horrible byproducts other than carbon, which we're trying to eliminate by bringing our mileage up. But there is this issue of nitrous, all the NOx's. This isn't nitrous oxide, it's the other ones. And anyway, these NOx's produce two kinds of pollution. One ends up being smog, the other one ends up being acid rain. And as you drive up your compression, you're going to produce more and more NOx's. Yes, a downside to jacking up your compression is that you will be creating more smog and contributing to acid rain. Anyway, we've got the Otto cycle, which is the 4-stroke cycle. I thought this is a nice little graph. I never pick anything off that's got a NASA symbol on it. But basically what you've got is you take your piston, you compress all your stuff. You get to this point right here, you fire off your ignition. Every single bit of your fuel burns, all of it, without the piston moving. And at that point, every single bit of the energy is available. Your piston begins to fall. Ding, you're down to here. Okay? So this is the idealized theoretical process right there. Let's take a look at a more typical automotive cycle. Okay, this is a much better graph as far as indicating what probably goes on inside the Volkswagen motor. So what you've got here then is a pressure buildup. You get your ignition, which causes a spike in the pressure, although it's not instantaneous. There's a little bit of a gap there, and a little bit of a gap over there. And it doesn't instantly start falling off. It's got kind of a curve up here at the top, so you kind of curve around a little bit. This looks, given how peaky that is, it's either been stretched out too far or it's a small combustion chamber. This is probably not quite what you got going on in a Volkswagen motor, but it's pretty close. But one of the things that you get when you compress the fuel is that the compressed fuel air mixture will burn faster. Okay, so you're going to run the same speed, but the fuel and stuff that you've plunked into your system burns faster. So you see this ignition point right there? What it doesn't show you is that this rise should be a little bit further out. You see, this indicates 90 degrees. Okay? And this would be 45 degrees. And you know that at 3200, you've got about 30 degrees of advance, which is about right there. This is closer to 30 degrees of advance right here, which means that point should be right here, which means at this point you've got to pressurize, and then this begins to push up. Okay? This right here is basically, it indicates negative work. As your piston is pushing up, it's doing negative work. This ends up being positive work. So if I can take my fuel and burn it faster, that means I don't have to have this ignition point way down here. The faster I can burn it, the further I get up here I can push it, which means less negative work. So a higher compression motor does less negative work. And on the back side, if you look at what's happening here, not all the fuel has been burned over here. But if I can get it to burn faster, it takes the fuel that's still burning back this direction and pushes it up this direction. That allows this peak to go even higher, which gets this entire graph line then pushes up higher, and you end up getting more positive work. So when you compress more, you do less negative work. You compress more, you get more positive work. So when you actually build a higher compression motor, you get this little side effect of a higher, quicker speed burn, allowing you to get more and more efficiency out of it. So if we come back over, let's go back to the spreadsheet. Okay, if you look at something like this, I go from 8 to 9, and it indicates that I would have a 4% better efficiency because of that little side effect, the fact that the fuel is going to burn just a little bit faster. You'll actually get a little tiny bit more than this. I'd imagine that you probably can get 5%. There's probably a 20% improvement in there. And all of these numbers could be improved by about 20% just because the fuel burns faster with a higher compression. It's one of those side effects. So you got negative side effects like increased nitrous NOx's, but you got good stuff like a faster burn. All right, one of the things that you're thinking is, oh, but Scott, you can't just jack up your compression. It's going to get hot, and my head's going to get hot. Head temperatures come from waste heat. And if you can increase your fuel efficiency and you burn less gas, if you're not burning gas, you're not releasing excess heat. So your temperature is going to stay about the same. You know, you need to produce 23 horsepower. You're going to produce it with less fuel. Yes, you're going to be burning at a higher temperature based on that graph, but you're going to have less fuel, less air. So when you look at it, you go, it's hotter, but there's fewer molecules. So it all nets out to about the same. It's 23 horsepower. You're going to run about a certain temperature. Either way, it all basically works out. The downside is that you're going to have a more powerful motor, and you're going to want to use that power, and you're going to put your foot on it, and you're going to feel it. And if you run outside the cooling envelope, and go back to my cooling video, where I specifically show this is the cooling envelope of the stock motor, you don't want to run outside it, you can overheat. The overheating comes not from the fact that compression is making your engine hot. This compression doesn't make your engine hot. All right? Burning too much gas makes your engine hot. Burning it at the wrong timing mark, let's go back to that graph, you don't want your ignition to be at the wrong spot. You take this and you put it too far down this direction, you hit peak pressure too high, too early, you'll blow off waste heat. Instead of getting work out of the system, you end up just having heat pinched up here in the top few degrees of rotation. On the other hand, if you take it and you push it up this direction and this lump goes too far back, your efficiency drops and you end up having to burn more gas, and that drives up your engine heat. So when you got high compression, it becomes very sensitive to your ignition. That's about the only downside I can find for it, is that as you jack your compression up, you have to get very, very tight on how you control your ignition. But yes, you've got to be able to control your point of ignition. If you don't, you can overheat. It's not because the compression does it, it's because you're burning fuel improperly. And you start varying from what was done in a stock fashion, and you're using stock distributors and stock advance curves, but you're not running a stock motor anymore, some bad things are going to happen. You've got to start modifying some things. You have to be your own mechanic. You can't go to the old guy who says, oh yeah, we run 32 degrees or 28 degrees. It's like, no, you've got a custom vehicle. You need to figure out what your advance curve is and come up with some way of making sure that it works. I thought that one went fairly smoothly, maybe not. I never know. I mean, I put these things together, and sometimes they go smooth and sometimes they don't. Maybe they scatter and jump around a little bit. I tried to make that one not jump around. But if you do put together your own spreadsheet as far as trying to figure out what compression ratio to use, there's something called the specific heat ratio. For exhaust gases, 1.4 to 1.3. In my graph, I used a value of 1.3. I don't know if I didn't point it out during the video. One of the other things I didn't point out is that if you take your compression ratio from 8 to 9, theory says a 4% increase. Suppose you're already at 9 to 1. You just made the decision, I'm going to go 9 to 1. What happens if I go to 10 to 1? All right, it's the same amount. I've just made a one jump, 8 to 9 or 9 to 10. What does the 9 to 10 jump get me? 3.3%. So there's a substantial drop-off as you keep making these jumps to higher and higher compression ratios. And the bleed off is less and less and less. Basically, the curve is a logarithmic curve. So you can push it higher and higher and higher, but you're not going to get a whole lot more out of it. You end up having to knock. But my personal recommendation, if you're at sea level, you should probably be 8.5. I think pretty much everything out there is 8.5. I mean, if you're building your own motor, you're like me. If it doesn't work, I can pull it apart. I can stick a shim in, drop my compression ratio a little bit. And like I say, I will put my motor where my mouth is when I go to build my 74. And I expect that car to be at least 9 to 1. Maybe even 9.5. Like I say, I'm running over 11 to 1 now, but I have to run very expensive gas in. It's a blast. But yeah, I'm not that much into running it with 92 and 93 octane. I'd rather cut it back to, I can use 80. I wouldn't mind plunking it full of 89 when I get there. But I'm not there yet. But anyway, I probably chatted on a little bit too much. If I forgot anything, if something wasn't clear, throw a comment down there at the bottom, and I'll get to it. Thanks. Enjoy your motoring. I've got other projects to do later.